In the quiet moments before sunrise, when the world outside still felt suspended in a kind of gentle stillness, Roker would often find himself awake, not out of habit alone, but because the mind, seasoned by decades of storytelling, rarely learned how to fully rest, especially after days shaped by difficult truths. And though many viewers knew him for his warmth, his steady presence, and the reassuring familiarity he brought into their homes each morning, there was another, more reflective side to him that had grown over the years, a side that had come to understand the emotional weight carried by journalists who sought not just to report, but to uncover. A perspective he had come to appreciate deeply through colleagues like Morgan Radford, whose commitment to investigative integrity often required stepping into stories that were as emotionally demanding as they were important. And as Al sat quietly with his thoughts, he considered what it truly meant to pursue truth in a world where truth could be complicated, painful, and at times deeply personal. He had seen it firsthand, the long hours, the careful verification, the responsibility of telling a story that could change lives, and he knew that behind every well-researched report was not just determination, but a human being absorbing the emotional residue of what they uncovered. And this realization stayed with him more now than ever, at a stage in life where reflection carried more weight than ambition. At home, Deborah Roberts understood this unspoken burden perhaps better than anyone, her own career shaped by similar pursuits of truth and storytelling. And in the quiet rhythm of their shared life, there existed a kind of mutual awareness, a recognition that the work they did, while meaningful, often came at an emotional cost that could not always be explained in words. And it was in their conversations, sometimes brief, sometimes lingering late into the evening, that Al found a space to process what he carried, not through dramatic expression, but through thoughtful reflection, a kind of quiet unpacking of the day's experiences. He would speak of the balance that journalists like Morgan Radford had to maintain, the careful line between remaining objective and allowing oneself to feel the weight of the stories being told. And Deborah, with a knowing nod or a gentle insight, would remind him that this balance was not a fixed point, but a continuous effort, something that shifted with each new story, each new revelation. Al had come to understand that investigative integrity was not just about facts and accuracy, but about responsibility, about honoring the truth without losing one's sense of humanity. And this understanding had gradually shaped the way he approached his own role, encouraging him to look beyond the surface of the stories he encountered and to recognize the deeper human elements within them. There were moments, particularly after especially challenging reports, when the emotional toll felt more pronounced, when the stories lingered in ways that were difficult to shake, and on those nights, Al would sit quietly, not trying to dismiss the feelings, but allowing them to exist, understanding that to care deeply was not a weakness, but a necessary part of the work. And it was in these moments that he often reflected on the resilience of those who dedicated themselves to seeking truth, the quiet courage it required to face difficult realities and to bring them into the light. Deborah's presence during these times was steady and grounding, a reminder that while the world could be complex and at times overwhelming, there was also a simplicity to the life they had built together, a foundation of shared understanding and mutual respect that provided a sense of balance amidst the intensity of their work. And whether it was through a shared meal, a walk in the evening air, or simply sitting together in comfortable silence, they found ways to reconnect with the parts of life that existed beyond the headlines. As the years passed, Al began to see his role and the roles of journalists like Morgan Radford in a broader context, recognizing that their work was not only about uncovering truth, but about helping others make sense of it, about offering clarity in a world that often felt uncertain. And this realization brought with it a quiet sense of purpose, a reassurance that even the most difficult stories had value, not because of their gravity alone, but because of the understanding they could bring. He also came to appreciate the importance of boundaries, of knowing when to step back and allow himself the space to process, to rest, to simply be present in his own life. And it was in these moments of stepping away that he found the resilience to continue, to return each day with a renewed sense of perspective and compassion. The audience, many of whom had lived through their own experiences of challenge and change, seemed to recognize this depth in him, the subtle balance between professionalism and empathy. And in that recognition, there was a quiet connection, an unspoken understanding that the stories being told were not just distant events, but reflections of the human experience they all shared. And so, as another day approached and the first light of morning began to break, Al prepared once again to step into his role, carrying with him not only the responsibility of informing others, but the deeper awareness of what it meant to seek and share truth, to honor the stories of others with care and integrity, and to navigate the emotional landscape of that work with a quiet strength that had been shaped over a lifetime, knowing that beyond the cameras and the scripts, it was this balance between truth and compassion, between duty and humanity, that truly defined his journey.